Okay, so something's kind of been on my mind for the past couple days, maybe a little bit longer. I have a book. It's called Grandmother's Counsel of the World. Um, and it is a book about the Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers. And I'm trying to think when I first heard about them. I don't really know when I first heard about them, but I know that I did, and I've been like just in awe of the work that they've been able to do when when they get together. 13 of these amazing women from all over the world. Um, there is one grandmother. There's let's see. There's one grandmother from Africa. There is most of the grandmothers are actually from Turtle Island in uh, South America. So most of the grandmothers are actually from the indigenous people here. But there is also one of the grandmothers is from Tibet. Um, one of the grandmothers is from Nepal. I know. Um, yeah, so they're from all over, and they all kind of came together out of a vision that people had been kind of having for a while. Um, my favorite story about the grandmothers is the story of Yupik grandmother Rita Blumenstein, where when her grandmother, when she was like 9 years old, her grandmother took her aside and said, "Now, when you're old and gray like I am, you're gonna be sitting on this council of 13 grandmothers. And so I've prepared 13 bundles for you, and you have to protect them. And then when the time comes, you bring them and you give them to each of the grandmothers, and then you keep one for yourself and you sit down with them and are part of the council." Um, so that just tells you, like, this council of these women has been in the making for, like, longer than I've been alive. That's for sure. Um, but it all kind of started. Also, I think there's like multiple starting points for things. Like one thing leads to another, but then another thing happens somewhere else, and that thing leads to something else happening, and then eventually, after you get enough starting points, they all kind of converge, and then you have something amazing like this Council of Grandmothers, and this book, and they also have a movie that is called For the Next 7 Generations, which I have been privileged enough to watch. Um, it definitely goes into detail about the first couple times that the grandmothers met, and there's even a place, I think it's in New Mexico, um, where there's like a temple and there's like 13 standing stones, each of the stones was like each one of the stones was kind of adopted by a different grandmother. And the guy who designed it had started designing sacred spaces based on inspirations that he got from the spirit world. Like he was a totally left-brained, logical person, and then he had this like awakening happen, and he started designing these places. And one of the places he designed, the grandmothers actually went to, and there was a stone there for each of them, and it was just like so. It's like it goes beyond synchronicity to something else. When all these things come together and make a story that's like bigger than a story. Um, but anyway, I've been attracted by the work that these grandmothers do. I mean, a lot of them in their communities, they are the traditional healers, they are the traditional doctors, and they are the ones who are guarding the medicines and protecting them. Um, and I think it's just amazing. Like one of the grandmothers, um, from one of the grandmother from Africa, she works with a plant called iboga. And one of the grandmothers works with Los Santos Niños, the sacred children, which are the mushrooms. One of the grandmothers, um, for example, works with peyote. So there's like this whole. They've come together through trying to protect traditional medicines from being patented by being stolen by the drug companies and basically maligned and abused in that way. So this is huge work that they're doing to protect traditional medicines and also the traditional ways of thinking and the traditional ways of doing things. Um, and then there's this vision had by the lady that kind of brought the grandmothers together. Her name is Jyoti, and she started having visions of the mother, Our Lady, the mother, um, and the mother handed her a basket, and there were 5 jewels in the basket, and the mother told her, these jewels go back to the very beginning. They are the most ancient ways of prayer. You are not to mix them, you are not to change them, but you are to hold them for me. And when the new millennium comes, you take them through the door of the new millennium and you hand them back to me because there's work that we need to do. And, it just amazes me that something so beautiful can come from visions. Um, it just amazes me and it inspires me. And I actually, um, GOT, her kind of claim to fame was starting out these spiritual communities um, called Kayamari, and she started these spiritual communities, probably at first not knowing what they would become, but as she started them out, more and more elders came to her and started teaching her and the community, the Kaimari, how to take care of the jewels from her vision, how to take care of the sacred ways of prayer. Um, and so I've been really wanting, like, it's on my heart to to join the grandmothers, to maybe one day meet them. And also it's been on my heart to become a minister of prayer through the Center for Sacred Studies, which is a program started by Jyoti that goes into learning from the grandmothers. Um, I think the centerpiece of the program itself, though, has to do with breath work, um, and how you can use breath to. It's called holotropic breath work. It was started in Europe by Stan Groff. Um, and it's like this whole system of an alternate way of doing things that really kind of takes Western medicine and says, "Hey, look it." So, I've really been kind of feeling like I need to do that kind of work. Um, and I don't know why. Like ever since I picked up this book, ever since I came into contact with the grandmothers through the book and through the movie and through reading. There's various interviews online where various people have interviewed Jyoti, and um, like I've just been attracted to this. I don't know why, um, but I feel like the grandmothers are very what the grandmothers themselves are not what's important, but what the grandmothers represent is more important than anything that you or I could ever, think of. Because the grandmothers to me are representatives of an older way of being in the world, a way of being in the world that, when it comes down to it, it's gonna be that way of being in the world that's gonna save the human race from destroying ourselves. Um, and it's funny because they have this game out now called Civilization 5. I don't know if you've ever played any of the Sid Meier's Civilization games, but they're all based on the idea of, you start out with like a little city and you grow it and grow it and grow it, and then pretty soon it gets big enough where you can like make other. It's basically like a worldwide, like you have a map of the world and you make pieces to play chess with, and then you like go to war with other countries, and it's disgusting, really. Um, what it teaches people about world history is disgusting and simplistic and myopic, and so I wrote on there today. I was like, patriarchal colonization equals fail, because it does. It's not gonna be that saves us. It's gonna be these grandmothers that give us the tools to save ourselves. I have a friend, and she's an awesome lady. She's actually, I don't know, she was initiated into Buddhism, and then she's also a priestess of Wicca and ceremonial magic, and she's a reverend. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, she's this great friend of mine, and she always says, don't look for a messiah outside yourself, because the only person that's gonna save you is you. And I tend to agree with her. But in order to save ourselves, we're gonna need different ways of thinking. We're gonna need different ways of being in the world other than just this, I need to run to McDonald's to stuff my face kind of thing. You know what I mean? Um, because so much of consumerism, so much of industrialism, so much of colonialism, so much of what that has left us with is this godless, spiritless, dry place. It's like a spiritual desert out there, and it's like that's not what the world is meant to be. We're meant to be in relationship with the trees, with the animals, with the grass, with the sky, with the thunder, with the lightning, with the sun and the moon. We're meant to be in relationship. And the white world doesn't understand that. They don't respect that. They call that way of thinking crazy, which is one of the reasons why I was, hospitalized the way I was. But anyway, wish me luck. I want to become a minister of prayer. Um, I actually put a blue deer on my. I have a profile at newlightbeings.com, and I put a blue deer as my icon or whatever you want to call that. So I'm like putting out little signals like hello. They say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, I'm still waiting on my teachers. Um, and I don't know if this is the one thing that I struggle with. I think sometimes when people are like talking about indigenous spirituality, they think very insularly, like they think, oh, this is the way our group does things, and this way is the only way, and that's this, and this is final, and don't think outside that little box that we put you in, kind of thing. And it's like, um, the thing that I got from going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, the thing that I got from that was that the vision has to be so much bigger because there's so much work to be done to do the closest I can come to it conceptually, honestly, in any language, is the idea of tikkun olam, like making the world a better place. Um, and in order to do that, the vision has to be so much bigger than what people are gonna, what people are gonna approve of. And I don't know, for instance, if my neighbor is going to understand why I want to help these grandmothers, but I don't care because this is the path that I'm on, and it's something that I'm not just gonna put down. Um, I struggled for a long time. I struggled with the whole idea of, these grandmothers, they're crazy. They use these strange plants to have visions. Um, all the arguments that the Western mind will make against what who these grandmothers are, what they represent, and what they do in the world. Um, so I struggled with that for a long time, and I also struggled with uh, just being indoctrinated as a subject person of Christianity. Um, let's just say I broke out of the damn church and ran to the hills, and I'm not coming back because so much of what the church purports to teach people, and so much of what they represent, and so much of what they stand for is so small minded. It's like they want to keep people from being too successful. They want to keep people in their place, kind of thing. And it's just disgusting. It's patriarchal colonization. It's just, I look at that, and I look at the power structure, I look at the hierarchy, and it's basically this big old pyramid with this one man at the top who thinks that he's the paragon of God. And it's like, you're not. You're a mere human being. Um, but he doesn't have a problem with other people thinking that he's God's representative on earth. It's just kind of disgusting in that way. And all I have to say is that Creator made each of us and is in relationship to each of us. And when you look at it that way, it becomes like a big circle instead of a huge pyramid with somebody sitting at the top bossing everybody else around. Um, but it just amazes me the difference in the thought patterns. Um, because so much of what Christianity, so much of what Western society, so much of what all that has stood for years is basically fear. And for me, when I'm around my own people, when I'm around other Indian people, you know, even Indian people who haven't been around the culture that long necessarily, there's this whole other vibe. There's this whole other relationship to the universe, and there's this whole other possibility of relationship that doesn't exist in the Western world. And when I realized that I was more comfortable going to my grandfather and offering him tobacco and saying, look, I have all this fear, I have all this paranoia, I have all this leftover junk from being colonized for so long. Um, I realized that he would come in, he would sit me down, and we would talk about everything versus, no, you can't talk to me because you have Satan inside of you or something. Like, it's just the way Western Christianity and Western thinking is so disgusting. And I don't mean to speak against anybody's religion, but you have to think about it for a minute. I mean, I've talked to Catholics for years, Christians for years, and they're all about the battle between good and evil. All about the battle between good and evil, and that's all they think about all day. And it's like, really? So you have all these fight or flight hormones going on in your brain over shit that probably isn't even there. Um, and I'm the one who's crazy? Really? Right, okay. Oh my gosh. So that's kind of the breakthrough that I've had um, as I've gotten to know work like this that exists in the world. Um, and like I said, I want to become one of the many people who Jyoti is working on training to become ministers of prayer, because I think what's going to happen is there is there is sort of a a waking up that's happening, um, and a lot of people aren't quite sure what to do with themselves once they wake up. I know I wasn't, but you know, it's hard because I've had to walk this road without any kind of guidance. And frankly, um, I don't trust my neighbor to make my path all that much clearer because, like I said, sometimes when you're dealing with a certain way of thinking, it's so insular and so you can only go this far, you can only do this much, you can only think these thoughts, and it's like, well, I'm sorry, I have other thoughts that I'm having, and other dreams, and other visions, and my visions are leading me this way. Um, and it's kind of interesting, like, and then I guess the other night, like, well, not the other night, like yesterday morning, I had this dream, and I had this dream that I was at this Ojibwe language immersion type camp thing with all these kids, and I guess I was there as a grown up learning the language. Um, but then there was gonna be this powwow or whatever, right? And there was like this lower area. It was kind of like a hole in the floor almost. And they kept all the flags down there for some reason. And all of a sudden, I'm like there, looking down in this hole. And all of a sudden, these flags start moving on their own, like somebody's carrying them and dancing with them, but you can't see who it is. Like, I don't know. It was kind of weird, um, and then I remember I was like totally wigged out by this, and so was everybody else, and they were like, what's going on? Why are these, like, what's going on? And since I was the only one around, they're asking me, like, why? I don't know why, but somehow the guy who got angry with me told me, he's like, what happened to you 3 years ago? Um, because I think he felt the spirits and was trying to discern whether they were positive or negative or whatever. And he was asking me to explain what happened to me 3 years ago and demanding to know what happened. And I'm like, what am I supposed to say to that, right? Um, but then all of a sudden, I was like, I was sitting there thinking, and I was praying, and I asked the flags that represented my people to come to me, and they did. And there were like 4 or 5 or 6 different flags that came and stood by me. Um, and I remember at that point, I started, hearing the wacky again. And instead of hearing the wacky took over my body and started speaking through me. And I'm like, okay, what's this? You know? And the last thing I remember, they mentioned a couple different places, but the last one that I remember, they insisted. They were just like, you know, insisting that I remember it. And that place was Round Lake up in Ontario. I looked it up. It exists. It's called uh, North Caribou Lake uh, Reserve, I think, and it's also called Wigamau. And yeah, so that came out in a dream that I had for some reason, and I don't know why. But everything happens for a reason. So now I just have to do more investigating, you know what I mean, and figure this out. Um, but anyway, I'll close there, and you guys have a good night. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. And I guess the reason why I'm not going. Ooh, the phone's ringing. Let's ignore it. Um, I guess the reason why I'm posting about this dream, or all this other stuff that I've had going on lately, um, versus like actually going to my neighbor about it, is because I know he's just gonna give me the standard, two-liner, oh, stay with the Ojibwe community, blah 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 blah, and it's like, I'm sorry, um, I, I respect him as a teacher, but sometimes even the teacher can be wrong about the answer to something. And frankly, I'm just afraid to go to him and be like, I've had this dream, because I'm afraid he's just going to be like, oh, you're crazy. Because we all know how often I've heard that. But anyway, I will close. Have y'all a good night. Be blessed. Namaste. On my relations.